have, oh, thank you, recording in progress, amazing. So we've been working for the last couple years to help make GEM, the Green Link Equity Map, make it something that is useful to folks who are doing awesome climate equity work. And so we've been in deep partnership with Green Link Analytics, which we'll hear more about in just a moment. So I'm going to share my screen and just for a moment. Let's make sure you can actually see the full thing here. All right, hopefully that looks all right. All right, so I just want to welcome you. I see a lot of new names, so really excited for those of you who are new to our monthly community of practice space. And for those of you who are coming back, amazing, thank you so much. So just to introduce you to a little bit like why we're here and what we're going to do together. Our monthly community of practice is a space where folks who are using data and relationship building to advance climate equity. So hopefully all of you have explored the Green Link Equity Map already. And if you haven't, one of our team will put the link in the chat so you can get going on that. But we really know that data does not tell the whole story. And tools like GEM, the Green Link Equity Map, these tools are really critical. And so you'll hear a lot more about that from our wonderful guest here today. But as you can see, we've got a lot of different members from across the country. We have about 300 folks who come in and participate. And each month we do different kind of offerings to make sure that folks are connecting across the country as they're trying to work through these really difficult issues of having equity data be useful to them and their constituents and their communities, and also really get into the practice and the challenge of using it at the local government level, at the community-based level, and in other spaces. So with that, I'm gonna, I wanted to do a quick shout out, if I can move this slide, aha. So we've gotten to this point only through the support of our national core team. We've got folks who over the last few years have really helped, shape the map and what it looks like now and the data and how it's represented, as well as guiding us and helping us figure out what kind of resources we need to provide for the users like you all. So just want to shout out to these folks. I know we have a couple of folks in the room here today. And yeah, just want to say thank you there. We really wouldn't have been here without y'all. So I'm going to pass it on to Jelly, and she's just going to share a little bit about Green Link just for a minute. And then we're going to have what you all came here for, Miss Lakeshia Wright, in just a moment.
Awesome. Thank you, Mina. And thank you again, everyone, for showing up today. This is going to be a really awesome session, something I'm very passionate about, which is ground truthing data and making it digestible. But for those of you who are new, my name is Angelica, or Jelly. I use she, pronouns, and I'm the Strategic Development Manager with Green Link Analytics for our equity team. And Green Link Analytics, we are a 501c3 based in Atlanta, Georgia, that focuses on clean energy and equity research. And we work on projects nationally. And our focus right here is with the Green Link Equity Map, or GEM, as you're referring to today, and how we use that alongside strong community engagement processes to make impact in the climate space. So I won't bore you with too much, but thank you again for coming. And I will pass it off to the star of the show, Lakeshia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jelly. So, of course, we've got to get our technology set up. So while I'm doing that, I'll introduce myself. So hi, everyone. I'm Lakeshia Wright. I am an urban planner and a UX designer and I don't like to call myself a data analyst because I like to think beyond the actual analysis of data. So I just call myself a data disruptor. So I am also, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I am in Chicago, but my work is pretty much everywhere across US and Canada of doing this. So I'm so happy to be here. This is one of the topics that I am so incredibly passionate about. So I was overjoyed to have the invitation to speak about this. So let me get my screen shared. All right. And time to do the thing that we all do now. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, looks great. Thank you.
All right, perfect. So today we're going to talk about translating data into action and using data as a tool to create equity and momentum. So again, a little bit about me, urban planner, UX researcher, data disruptor. You've heard about this already. But let's jump right into data for action. So again, data can be a powerful tool for engagement when used effectively. However, we know that data is not enough. We cannot just hand someone data and say like, here, this is what we found. Life is great, right? Because we found what we're thinking and everything's good. So this is about not only taking that data, translating it to something that people can feel connected to, but also can use to move things forward. So we're going to cover 3 topics today. We're going to talk about how to use data thoughtfully, so avoiding any unintentional harm and looking at any things that kind of just will turn your community off when getting started initially when you're working with data. Then we're going to talk about that actual engagement with communities using that data and using it to build connection and ownership, buy-in, all of those good things. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about keeping the momentum. So once we've done these things, we've engaged the community, how do we make sure that they stay not only engaged, but invested in your process as well? So our first section, using data thoughtfully. So again, data, very powerful tool. When used thoughtfully, you can tackle so many different things when using your data. However, again, if you're not doing it thoughtfully, you can cause significant harm when using your data. And if you do it thoughtfully as well, you can actually prevent harm or change those things that come up that usually cause harm. So one of those things you can do is humanize your data. Realize that any data point that you give represents someone. Even if you feel like that data point represents an object or phenomenon or something like that, there are people behind that. And that is something that you need to keep in mind, that the people who are reflected in this data, they make decisions, they feel emotions, they have needs, they have wants, they have full lives that are actually reflected in that data, even if you think that it's isolation and that it's in isolation. And you'll see throughout this entire thing, there is a theme to whatever you do not use data in isolation. That again, that data needs to be around all of these different elements, whether or not, again, it's reflecting a person, a thing. There's so much more to it than just the number itself. Then we have take responsibility for your data. This one I know is kind of hard sometimes because you feel like as an analyst or practitioner, your job is to eliminate any bias that can come into your data. You're like, I just need to report the numbers as is and then work with it as I can. But there's actually an element of responsibility that we need to take with our data to make sure that it's not used for harm. And again, it's not necessarily in the phase of like introducing bias into this, but actually thinking about how can you position this as best as you can possible. So we're going to look at one of the indicators in the gym. I use health insurance stress because I'm just looking at this map. I went through this map and I was just looking at things like that. They're just fascinating in general. So I found this one in particular, health insurance stress. And this is a map of the city of Chicago. And you can see, if you know anything about Chicago, the south and west sides are very concentrated with Black and brown people, the center of the city, north side of the city, less so Black and brown people. And then also when you look at other elements about poverty or job insecurity or even just job quality, you see patterns in the city of whether or not people are, working jobs with like high job quality where they're getting insurance through their jobs or something like that. So we can see that right now, this seems pretty easy to understand as it stands, right? You can even look at the legend. You can get a little bit more information if you were a little bit unclear of what this is telling you, essentially showing you that it's the median percentage of adults without health insurance. Pretty straightforward. So again, this seems like something that can live in isolation because in your mind, you're like, I understand the story. I feel the story. I get this. But when you look at this and you actually start thinking about it in terms of harm, you have data points that you can bring out of this map. So you can imply out of this map. So Black and brown people are less likely to be insured. Sure, we could see that in the map. Black and brown people are less likely to pay medical bills after an emergency. Okay, that's like a next step. That's something that we can take our next step and look at. And then Black and brown people are more likely to be skeptical of healthcare. Those are all data points that you can either take out of the map, or you can either do like a little bit of secondary research and come up with. But when used in isolation and not with responsibility, harm can come out of that so easily. So you can have the result of, well, then there's no need to have preventative care in these neighborhoods. They're not going to pay for it. It's expensive. They don't have insurance. They're probably not going to take advantage of it. So why put it there? Or you have people who then use other data points and say like, well, you know what? I have this one over here about Black and brown people taking advantage of insurance and paying their bills. And then we have hospitals constantly complaining about losing money and not being able to be in certain places. And you can connect those and now cause harm. You can say, you know what? Hospitals are expensive. They lose money. These people are probably not going to pay, or they're probably not even going to go. So why build in this community? Ultimately leaving people without like level 1 trauma centers or immediate care or anything like that because of the assumption that the data equals this harm. So again, it's doing things to prevent this from happening by saying Black and brown people are less likely to be insured and building out a story around that. Why is that the case? What happened for that to be the case? Where does things like job quality come into that so that you can build a solid foundation around those facts? So then our next thing is avoiding placing the burden of change on your audience. So often we see things where there is an issue, let's say flooding. The burden is typically back on the homeowner to say, all right, you know what? You need to put your house on stilts. You need to seal your basement. You need to do all of these different things. And ultimately, sure, that would help, but one, that doesn't give you like systemic change. And also that puts all of the burden back on the person of saying, well, if you can't do this, it's on you to solve your problem. And that actually leaves people feeling overwhelmed, undersupported, and all of these other issues. So then, of course, the question always comes up next. What happens when your implementation relies on community participation? So, two things. One, community participation and implementation is different than burden. Burden is when someone else prescribes that solution onto a community and says, do it, or that's it. If you can't do it, you don't have a solution. But when you're doing this with community participation, there are 3 elements that come into play. So you have willingness over requirement. So in other words, you have the community willing, that they know their burden, they're willing to do this in order to solve the problem and get support to do it without it saying, this is the requirement, do it, or we don't have a solution for you. Then we have community buy-in from the beginning. If the community is able to tell you what may feel like a burden or what may feel like something that they want to or can accomplish with this, then that gives you a better understanding of what implementation techniques will actually work with the community and will help them, and again, not burden them. Last but not least, you want to promote an ownership of solutions. So the community is coming up with solutions themselves. They have ownership in it. And again, they're able to avoid their own burdens that you may not even be thinking about in the first place. So they're able to kind of support these solutions on their own. And again, you come in and you are the support system for those things. So then we have also avoiding weaponization and saviorism. So weaponization, again, is using that data as a weapon, just like we saw in the example of health insurance. And then saviorism is this belief that you have to come in and you have to save people. We have to remember when using data that we are just a giant toolkit, that if you think about building a table, the community has all of the pieces already to build that table. What you need to do is be the person who brings the hammer and the nails and the glue and the measuring tape and all of those things for people to put it together. And then also expertise as well, that you can support the community building something by saying, you know what, actually, if you were to glue the legs together, then nail them together, that would give extra stability. Like you are the person who has those tips that you bring to the community, but you're not necessarily saying, build a table, that's your only way. So that's understanding, again, your placement and using your data and helping out communities. So moving on, this is basically a summary of everything we just learned. Your stats cannot live in isolation. They cannot live in a desert, cannot be by themselves, surrounded by nothing else. It makes no sense. It does nothing for anyone. It just cannot live alone. So now we're going to jump into step 2, which is engaging the community. So again, data is not just useful for your planning, but it actually is an engagement tool. So you can share stories and statistics and things like that with this to help motivate the community to take action or to be involved in any processes that you have going. It's frozen. Okay, there we go. It's unfrozen now. All right, so first things first, establish your goals with the community. Never come in and just say like, here are our goals for you. These are the things that you need. This is what we have looked at our stats and said, these are the things that you need to improve on to be like an active community with all of these different things. Like never come in with goals already in mind. Establish those goals with the community. And another thing to always avoid when doing this is never tell a community what they know. They're there. They know. They don't need someone coming in and saying like, hey, you know, we saw on paper that 35% of you are in poverty. That community knows. They know the impact, they know the possible devastation, they know all of the things about it. They may not be able to tell you that exact percentage, but they know. So what you need to come with is either a plan or some other connection or some other insight with that data than just saying, oh yeah, we see what's going on here. That it's a great way to turn people off where they're just like, oh, so we're just lab rats to you. You're just studying us. You're telling us things we already know. Great. We don't need this. So again, co-create those goals when it comes to communities. It's a way to, again, break down those barriers, break down any divides, and then let the community know that you are there with them. So another thing you can do is help your audience understand that they are the data. This one is extremely important. Again, we tend to use data in isolation. We tend to look at it and feel like there is a separation between the numbers that we see on the page and who we are as people. And a good example of this is that, let's say we go back to that original statistic that we talked about, and we say that 35% of the community is in poverty. If the community sees that and they use their quantitative abilities and they start saying like, actually, are we really? That it doesn't feel that way. I mean, are you sure that's the right stat? Number one thing to do, never push back on that. The community's goal and their data and what they're giving you is always what is on the ground. But if you start to hear those things like, actually, I don't see myself reflected in this data. Those numbers don't feel like they represent me. Something else is kind of going on here. Like what's the deal? So let's talk about that. So what happens when your data does not reflect the community's experience? There are 3 ways to tackle this. There is explore why. That is the common sense one. Explore why. But never, ever, ever doubt the community's experience. Their lived experience is also key. That typically should be your guiding points when it comes to using data. And then you can start looking for discrepancies. They're not always discrepancies, but there are times where you can start looking for discrepancies. They're saying like, maybe there's an issue with data collection methods. Maybe you see that the data collected for this community only represents 100 people, and those 100 people are people who go to religious institutions. And those people are also people who decided to show up at this religious institution on a Thursday afternoon at 1 p.m. Like that's a very specific person and cannot represent the entire community. So you might start to see different things come out through that way. Also, there are other discrepancies that can happen too of whether or not, like, just culturally speaking, whether a community feels open to giving that data at this point in time or when it's collected, or even collection methods in terms of like whether or not you gave someone a digital survey, whether or not you're requiring them to use their phone. These different things can all come up with these discrepancies. But again, there doesn't always have to be a discrepancy when it comes to that data and that collection. Your numbers may be exactly what the numbers are in the community, and the community can definitely feel like there's something different. So then you go on to the next step, which is exploring your new data point. Whenever there's a mismatch between these things, that's a new data point. That is a new thing to explore. That is a point of innovation. If you find that your data says that 35% of the community is in poverty and the people in the community don't feel that way, start the storytelling part of this. Start collecting more qualitative data. Maybe the community says like, well, actually, it's because we have support. We feel like the local church is giving us daycare, or the local pantry is open 24 hours a day, or all of these different things that can alleviate the pain of poverty could exist in these communities. And then that could be a new data point for you to explore and to start looking at. And then again, you can also change your approach. So let the community tell you what needs to be explored. If there is this disconnect where it's like, okay, poverty, don't feel like it, maybe then there's a point too where the community can say like, you know what, actually, I would love to see how many support services exist in our community compared to another community that seems the same, or data-wise seems the same on paper. Or I would love to see how many daycares have opened up, how many this has opened up, how many that has opened up, that you can start thinking about like what's there, and then let the community also tell you what's missing. You can sometimes get to the same conclusion by using completely different data. So again, maybe your approach is to use poverty data. Maybe their approach is to say, actually, maybe this is a job quality issue. Maybe this is a housing supply issue. Maybe this is a resource or social service issue instead, and then approach it that way. So then we also have paint a picture with words. So this is our big point. Stories need to be told, and that is how you support data. You can have your data points, and again, if they live in isolation without some sort of story around them, that's going to turn people off. But you have to go to the community to get them to tell their story around this data, to say like, yeah, actually, I see how this reflects me. I see how it doesn't reflect me. Let me tell you a story about how that data point is present in my life. So if you have an activity, try to go through this so that we can have as much time as possible for this activity. So we're going to do building a story with data. So the tool that we're going to look at is something that you can do with community members. And we're going to do it as just individuals as well. But you can use this kind of technique to get people to build their story if that they're kind of people who either are not really like big on qualitative data, or they don't understand how their story and how their lives are reflected in a data point that's on the screen. So here is the link. We can also put this in chat as well. I think I saved the link, but let me see if I can put this here. Okay, so I have it here. All right. So this is the link to a Figma board. You can also use that link that's on the screen. You can start jumping in as you can. There's nothing you have to do with this quite yet. I'll explain what we're going to do with this in a second, but I see people jumping in. Also, I have a screen behind my screen. So if it looks like I'm looking up into space, I'm just looking at this screen that's right behind my screen that is above my current screen. So, okay, there's the people jumping in. So I think we're good. Oh, we're frozen again. Okay, so here's our data point that we're going to talk about and we're going to use this board for. So research has found that on warm summer days, low-income communities of color can experience extreme heat conditions that are often more than 10 degrees Fahrenheit, warmer than surrounding areas. So keep that in mind. On the board, you'll also see that data point. Just keep it in mind as well. And then here's a map of it. So I just use Chicago as an example. I just typically do. But you can think about this from any community that you like. It applies the same way. So we're looking at this and we're looking at this data point. And again, we want to keep things in mind, but there's a story around this. We don't want data to live in isolation. We see that there's some distinct patterns going on. So now we're going to take the time to think about how does this pattern that you see on the screen affect individuals? So what we're going to do is we're going to build a story together. There are 5 steps to our story, and on your screen, on the Figma board, I will pull that up a second on my screen as soon as we go over this. There are 5 points to this story that we're going to review. So there is and again, you can either do this from your own personal perspective, or you can make up a perspective. You can pretend like you're a person who's living in one of these communities as well. And you could say, like, who are you? Are you a renter? Are you a homeowner, business owner? You're just someone who travels through. You're someone who actually actively avoids traveling through. Because I want to point out too that with your data, the absence of data is also a data point as well. If you see that most people do something, the people who don't do it are also key to understanding what's happening in this. So if you're a person who's like, I don't notice a difference, then we can start looking at why don't you? The next thing would be, what is the conflict? High utility bills, you can't join being outside. There's something that's happening in your life that affects this data point. And then number 3, key elements. So what's the key element in this engagement? Do you have an outdoor engagement coming on? Is there a heat wave that's been forecasted? You have a broken AC, things like that. The 4th part of the story is who else is part of the story. Because again, as with data, nothing lives in isolation. Other people are affected, whether those people are in your immediate vicinity, so family members, or this is a broader like citywide thing. Are more people running their AC? Is this going to be a power grid thing? Or even people that you may not even have a direct interaction with. So building maintenance workers, are they off today? What happens if something goes wrong? And then last but not least, what needs to be resolved? What, especially as part of the conflict, but what exactly needs to be resolved in this? So what I'm going to have you all do, we're going to try to open this. Give me 1 second to switch over. Okay, so hopefully you guys, let me make this larger. You guys can see this Figma board. And again, these are our things. So what we're going to do is we're going to have everyone take a few minutes. So we'll say about 10 minutes-ish. We're not going to go away. We're going to kind of talk through this. I'll just shout out things as I see them up here on the board. But what we're going to do is we're going to have everyone take the stickies that are down here. So the little things that look like Post-it notes. If you like, you can use the circle as well. They kind of function the same way. But you're going to take this sticky note. You're going to click on it, and then you're going to place it in a section. And in this section, you're essentially going to answer the question per section. So section 1 would be question 1, who are you in this story? So I'll just say I'm a renter. So what you're going to do is you're going to actually start piecing these together. They can be detailed. They don't have to be detailed. They can be as simple as renter if you like. And you're going to start posting those in. And then hopefully, if we see people posting things, we can do kind of a spread out as well, move to section 2, section 3, section 4, things like that. and answer the questions. And then once we've done that, we're going to understand like how easy it is to build a story if you break it down for people to kind of talk about this in individual elements. And as we go, like I might just, shout out things and just say like we can piece together each element of the story and come up with a full story related to this data, and then see just how many stories can come out of this to give you direction. So I will give you guys a chance to do this. Again, we don't have to go away. I might give you guys a little bit of silence because I'm sure if you've heard my voice for 35 minutes straight, you're done with it. But I'll give you guys time to just start putting things down. And again, a few minutes of silence, and then I'll come back in and just start shouting out some of the cool things I see on the screen. And I'll keep this board up too, that if anyone, if you're like, I don't like these type of boards, I just want to watch, that's perfectly fine as well. But I hope that you do participate.
Lakeshia, could you repeat we saw a couple new people come in, or just the prompt?
Oh, yes.
What the data point is that we're working from?
Yep. And then I will also repost that link in chat because I don't know if chat keeps the link or not. But the prompt that we're working for everyone who just came in is we're taking this data point here on the screen. So research about warm summer days. And then we are building a story from that using these 5 elements on the screen. So 1 through 5, and then each element you're doing like an individual word or maybe a sentence if you like about the key point, and then you're posting them here. So again, board 1 would be point 1, and then at the end we'll piece together a story. And again, keep in mind too, as you're doing this, stay true to what you're thinking. If there's something in this too that you're like, I don't know, this feels weird, put it down. There is no wrong answer whatsoever in this, and we'll see how that actually still becomes part of the story. Let me post that link again. And again, I'll leave this up on my screen. We can get like 3 on the screen at a time. And also too, sorry, one last thing. Feel free to spread out too. You don't have to start with section 1. You can actually keep your focus on either 2, 3, 4, 5 as it comes to you. Because it doesn't matter how your mind like thinks about the details of the story. It can still come together as a story. I love seeing all the little hands and like cursors move around on the screen. So much fun. Okay, I promise I'll stop talking at one point, but don't fear repeating someone else. If you put down that you're a renter and someone else also put down that they're a renter, that is perfectly fine. Repeats are fair game.
And do you want us to keep moving through the other questions as well?
Yes.
Great.
So yeah, keep moving through those other questions. Actually, I'll leave that up on the screen too as people are going. That might be a little bit easier as well. There we go. And again, feel free to, you can start at 5 if you know instantly what needs to be resolved and you back into your story. That's fine as well. And we'll do this until like 1:43 Eastern. So 5 more minutes. I see some very interesting things popping up. I love this. I love the one, I'm a subletter. I'm in the city for summer internship, but I live in another state year round. Love that level of detail. My utility bills get too high and we have to keep our home warmer than comfortable. Yes. All right, 2 more minutes. All right, 1 more minute, but I'm going to explain what's going to happen next with this. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go through here and I'm just going to literally pick just a random post-it for each section and build a story with it. And then we'll talk about data points that come out of this. So in other ways to explore and find new analysis or things that you can build into your implementation from that. And then have the community see how their literal lives and their stories became data. All right. So I'm just going to pull a couple ones out. I really like this one, the subletter one, because I feel like that is a forgotten group sometimes of people who are here and affected, but sometimes like temporarily as they would think, but it still affects their lives. I'm going to pull from this next section. I like this one. The utility bill is the one I read before about keeping your place warmer than comfortable. This next section, I'm going to have the unreliable public transportation one, because I am very much pro-transit. All right, then this next section for section 4, I'm going to pull and continue to keep writing. There, you definitely can keep writing. You know what, I'm gonna do this one, family staff, most immediately, this one as well. And then out of this last one, I'm gonna pull this one. So I apologize if I pulled any from the same person that was reading and not necessarily paying attention to who did what, but hopefully I have different people here. Okay, so now we have our story. So we have our story. I'm a subletter. I'm in the city for internship, for summer internship, but I live in another state year round. My utility bills get too high and we have to keep our place warmer than comfortable. And then there's a heat wave coming. And on top of that, there's unreliable public transportation. So you're waiting outside in the sun. But you also remember that other people around you are affected. So your families and staff most immediately, and then the community around you. So basically, you know that there are not necessarily people around you who can support, because they're all suffering from the same thing. And then last but not least, you're like, you know, it would help if we had walkability, green infrastructure, shade, tree canopy, all of those things, right? So we've built a story just out of random facts. And what you could do with this, if you're engaging with a community, is you can have people do exactly what we just did. And this can be something that's digital. You're doing this like Zoom times, or if you do it with literal different color post-it notes on a board, you can have people do this, and then you can have people pull their story from other people's stories, because you'll start to see that there are common things that people haven't, that they haven't even thought about, that they could say, you know what, actually, I am this, I'm this, and I'm this, and I didn't think about it. I wrote this one here, but actually this also reflects my life. And you can start seeing that there's that story. And then from there, once you have your story, you can start pulling data points from this. You can start looking at actually how many people are subletters. Data point to pull from this. Utility bills. I know Jim has utility things on their map, so you can go there, start looking at that type of data. You know that that's your next data to pull. Then you have, okay, unreliable public transit, another data point that you can start exploring. And the community sees themselves in these data points because they know that they're the ones that they gave you. And they can all be around your original data point, your one sentence data point. You're now making it not live in isolation by having the community build out the rest of that analysis around you. So then same thing, who else is building this? Start looking at like the statistics of who else is actually kind of dealing with those problems in this community, more population type data. And then you have your, like the things that you want to see coming from this. So I hope you guys had fun kind of thinking about this, and then thinking about where do you go from here with those data points. So let me switch screens. Switch back to my other point. If I can figure out how to do that smoothly. We're trying. Okay, so we're back. So remember, we know like from basic storytelling that you have those elements, you know, you've got your hero, you've got conflict, and then the resolution. So if you notice that this part did not have a resolution, it talked about what should be resolved, but there wasn't a resolution. That is where you come in. You are building the story resolution. You're completing that story. And your project, whatever you're working on, things like that that's it. That's the completion of the story for everyone. And again, depends on how your story goes, but your project should fit those stories that you built. So last but not least, in this section, we'll talk about keeping the momentum going. So momentum builds trust. It helps people to feel engaged. It is what brings your project to life. And it demonstrates your investment. It demonstrates that you are not just here to throw some stats at people, say that you understand their problems, come up with a solution that's isolated, and leave. So here are a couple key things that you can do for that. You can take the time to follow up. Seems very simple. You hear it all the time, but following up really does truly show that you actually listen to what people said, you're engaged with them, and you appreciate the time and the effort and the vulnerability that people gave you when it comes to this process. And then also there are other ways to engage. And I like to say that you can be active or passive in this engagement. I know typically we try to just stick to active things, but when it comes to passive engagement, it actually works as well. It can be as simple as just showing up. If you know that that community has a farmer's market going on, they have a community event or something like that, just be there. That level of engagement of saying like, actually, you know what? I like this community enough. I care enough about you guys. I want to know how you interact with your surroundings. I just want to be there. That shows a level of engagement that people typically don't do. And then there's the active participation. You can support a local organization with their data efforts. You can start saying like, you know what, I've got tools. You know what, I know about this cool tool named GEM, and this actually could get you, organization looking at these issues as well, access to data. Let me put you in touch with the team there who can get you access and things like that. So that starts to be like, okay, I know that this project is not my project, but it may be adjacent or it may be nothing like it. But we know that those people are part of the community and they need to be engaged. So start offering ways that you can help with their projects as well. And then last but not least, we have established a constant feedback loop. So everything's two-way. As the community is giving you feedback on your engagement, you're giving them feedback in the form of data, and it goes back and forth, and it's constant. It never ends. Even when you think like, okay, we've got a project, it's on the ground, everything's going, feedback never stops. You want the community always feel like their voices are being heard. And I put feel, but I tend to not typically say feel, because you want people to actually have their voices heard, not just feel like their voices are heard. But we want people to actually feel like they're invested in this process, that at every step of the way that they actually have someone there that they can say, you know what, this should change, this should do this should do that. And remember that our projects are not necessarily ever final. I know that that feels uncomfortable for a lot of us because we like to do things and then like move on to the next thing, but nothing's really ever final because the people who live in a community will have to live with that indefinitely. So as long as they're living with it indefinitely, they should be able to give feedback on it. So that is what I have. It is question and answer time, but I'm going to leave my contact information on the screen while we're doing this question and answer time. So feel free to email me, go to my website, add me on LinkedIn. Yeah, anything you have to say. I love insights. You don't have to ask the question. You can just make a statement. You can say, I thought about this cool thing. I thought you might be interested in that. Anyway, we can stay connected. I am happy to stay connected with everyone here. But yeah, any questions? I think you guys can unmute yourself and ask. If not, I'll keep an eye on chat if we want to do it that way as well.
Yeah, you can definitely unmute yourselves. I see a question in the chat as well. I put one in, but let's skip over. Let's do Simran's first. Let's see. So, Simran, do you want to come off chat and ask that question?
Sure. I'm sorry. I know it's a kind of a long hauled email, but I loved your presentation, and sorry, my video is acting up. But I am coming from, so I came from like the public health space, and now I'm in like research development for a company that wants to build in marginalized areas, and they're supporting various developers. And so we've been doing a lot of the reports, and I keep trying to explain to them that like no matter how much data I'm collecting, you know, true qualitative work is going to come from like there's so much that's happened between like now and when they started this, you know, pretty much like just prior to the pandemic, that what I'm hoping is that they can kind of see from the, you know, I pulled reports from like Neighborhood Scout, right? Because it's a lot of the information on the area is there, but I'm trying to like pretty much like point them in the direction that they need to link up with something like this, where you can really extract data from the people within. And I feel like I'm in my head, I'm like, I know what qualitative like data is, and maybe I'm just, you know, you start to doubt yourself. You know, I'm like, maybe the public, you know, health sphere is like doesn't have a part in real estate, but it does, because this is where we have all of these issues. So I would love to kind of pick your brain at some point, or just like what do you recommend on getting that, I guess, getting that conversation more streamlined?
Yeah, we could definitely talk more about it, but just right off the top of my head, and this is only a semi answer, I do recognize that, but there is always this kind of in the background feel of disqualifying qualitative information, right? So you're just kind of like, I mean, that's just a story. How true is it really? And there is a big hurdle to get over with some people, especially if they're very hardcore quantitative data, of saying like, okay, how do we get there, right? So I mean, I always have coffee in front of me. Whether or not that's good or bad, I always do. And so it always becomes my examples when I talk about things. So there are things that are facts, right? Where you have to get people to understand that Lakeshia has coffee is a fact, right? But people need to know Lakeshia has coffee in this cup. Why? And I think that that is kind of that disconnect that people don't always have or know how to get, because it's easier. I mean, I hate to say it, but I just have to be honest. Sometimes it's just easier to come up with it on your own. And you can use data to back that up. Lakeshia has coffee because she's tired. Okay, yeah, that probably makes sense, right? Lakeshia has coffee because she's cold. It's warm. Okay, that kind of makes sense. And people then start to piece that together because they find it easier than just saying, hey, Lakeshia, why do you have coffee? And I'd say, I have coffee because I'm cold. In fact, you're right. I have it because it's warm and I'm cold. So there is getting over that hurdle of getting people to understand that you either can back into it, you can prescribe it, you can be wrong. And that is typically what ends up with these disasters, especially with developers. Of when they come to a community and they're like, oh yeah, this is what we're doing. It's great. And the community's instantly like, I hate you. You haven't even said a word yet. I hate you because I know what you're going to say. But if you came in saying like, actually, you guys, what do you want? And then back into it, chances are the community does have some sense of what they need, and you can fulfill that need with what you're doing, but they've got to give that first. So I know it's a very long roundabout answer that can be summed up of saying is definitely people definitely need to understand, and definitely that sometimes that just means taking like a different / backwards or, bottom to top approach to it.
I love that. My last question is just on that. So if I was to engage certain communities or neighborhoods in something like this, this translating the data, I mean, this is Fig Jam, but I think I've used murals in the past. Like, is there some type of outreach like message that you've sent in the past that's successful? Because I love how it's like kind of anonymous, but it's not, and it engages, but it's like, I feel like it gives people the independence and the confidence to share what they need.
Could I propose that we take Natalia's question real quick, and then
Sorry.
wrap, and then no, all good, and then y'all can follow up over email. That would be awesome. Thank you. Sorry to cut you off, Natalia. I'd love to hear your question before we wrap.
Hi, folks. Thank you. I'll try to be quick. My name's Natalia. For those who I haven't met, I work for an organization based in South Florida called Catalyst Miami. We're very community-based and have been approached for different processes like this that sometimes include us, sometimes include the community members that we work with. And I just wanted to kind of raise a point, and I'm always open to best practices and ways to work around this, but we find that often, I know you just did it as an example, but like it literally happens in that the people who are leading the process then go to the sticky notes and say, oh, this one looks good to me. This one sounds good to me, and pick and choose. And I think it's really important to be prepared for feedback either that goes beyond the scope or that's different than what you would like to see in the process. And yeah, so I guess I'm just curious how best practices to hold whoever's leading the process accountable to all of the feedback. And to also ensuring that, people also don't want their story to be disconnected. I think a lot of times when we talk about like community safety and resilience planning, people define those two bodies of work in very different ways. And so sometimes their experience becomes disjointed from the solution that they envision as most helpful for them. And it ends up getting targeted to other people or a different sector. And so, yeah, I just think I really appreciate the activity, but I think because I think it's more accessible and just being able to have like little bits, but just also ensuring continuity in people's stories. Sorry for taking up time.
No, don't be sorry at all. What needs to happen to make sure that that does not happen and that people aren't, again, picking and choosing what goes through is that at no point in the process should the person, so like me as facilitator, I did it for the sake of like the exercise, but at no point in time should the person who's trying to do the solution build that story out. Like that actually should be on the community to build their story so that that story stays true to them. And also that there's always going to be disagreement, right? So there can be somebody who says like, you know what, I think like a great solution for flooding should be more green infrastructure, or actually like, you know, I want to be able to plant plants that, you know, will block my house, something like that, right? Like there's that. And then someone else across the street can say, actually, no, those bring bees and bugs, and I don't want that whatsoever for that. The thing is, people often don't want to take the time to actually walk through those solutions together. It just, I know that I'm speaking in a term that feels almost like infinite time, infinite money. But I think when you start your process, you do need to build in time for people to do that, or a platform for people to do that even after the meeting, where they can say that this is kind of where we're going and things like that, you know. Oh, sorry, I saw your comments. Yes. No, you're fine. Misunderstanding, as much as I like to say, like anything that's like a misunderstanding or is data, everything is a misunderstanding. Is not really a misunderstanding. It's really of just communication, or it's like, oh, I get that now. That's never, ever a bad thing. If anybody takes anything from that, there is no such thing as wrong or bad or whatever. Just, it just isn't. It's always, you know, a, oh, cool type of situation. So, sorry, my clock has disappeared on the screen. I don't know if we're at time. I
We are at
apologize if we
time, yeah.
are.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your wonderful question, Natalia, and for your answer, Lakeshia. We've learned a lot being here. Really appreciate everything that you've brought and given us a lot of food for thought. And so we'll hopefully see you back again as part of our community soon. I know we're over time. I put a couple links in the chat for our participants here. If you're not already involved in the GEM email list, please sign yourself up. You'll be signed up after this as well. Check out our resources from the past year of calls. And of course, we've got Lakeshia's information here on the screen. So please reach out to us or to Lakeshia, and we'll be sending you all the resources afterwards as well. So thank you again so much, Lakeshia. We're honored to have you here, and for everyone who joined us in spite of all the technical difficulties. So thank you so much. It was great to have you all here, and we'll catch you next month on October 27th. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you,
you so much.
Lakeshia. Thank you. So great.